playing mapping of players. And in the youth space, I'm patron with the Natas Club, which is a youth entrepreneurship and innovation club, a global one. And I also have a self-funded youth mentorship program called Impact Parallels Digital, which is already 5 years old and focusing on employability skills for the youth and career development. And we also have a talent academy and an education fund for underprivileged youth aged 14 to 24. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next panelist.
Thank you very much, CEO. Good afternoon. My name is Philip Pande. I serve at Corporate Career Academy as the Executive Director. The Corporate Career Academy is an organization focusing on transition from campus to career, basically from training to industry. So we work with young people from learning institutions, both basic and higher education. We work with out-of-school youth, but I also serve as the youth envoy for All Africa Association of SMEs based in Nigeria with offices across Africa. And I am a certified mentor by the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. And so I proudly serve as a youth mentor in many other programs in government, outside government, the private space. We are the conveners of the annual East African Employability Summit, focusing on developing career-ready young people within the context of the future of work, as we know it as an evolving space. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And finally, we have a lady in the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's definitely a privilege to be the only woman sitting on this panel of great men. Ruth Bolo is my name. I wear several hats, not literally, but I am the head of programs for the Kenya Parliamentary Climate Advocacy Association. I'm also a podcaster with Female Lifestyle and Thoughts, that's FLATS. But most importantly, I serve as the board chair of the Young Women Leaders Connect, where we are currently focusing on helping young women who are in university politics cross over to national politics, giving them a chance to participate in governance and democracy. I also train and facilitate legislatures. So I've worked with the Kenya Women Parliamentarians Association, Center for Multi-Party Democracy, amongst others. So when we talk about governance and democracy, that's definitely something I've got a passion for. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Also, we'll be joined by Theresa Oduol from the USA. She'll be joining us online. Ruth, you are two ladies in the panel. Thank you so much. Let me begin with an action here, a lecturer at Taita Taveta University. Kenya is basically a youthful nation. The median age in Kenya is less than 20 years. It's about 19.8. That means, therefore, that you cannot discuss development without youth involvement. Now, from your understanding, how well have we created structures within the education, within the mentorship and skills development spaces? How well have we created support mechanisms towards ensuring that the young people truly and fully take part in development?
Thank you for that question. It is true that Kenya, like the rest of Africa, is a young nation, median age of barely 20. And if we are not careful, we are preparing for a ticking time bomb in the youth with their youthful energy. And looking at what is happening in terms of transition from high school to university, less than 20%. It is only last year when we saw it crossed over 20% to about, I think, 25% if we consider C+ and above. So I can say that we don't have adequate structures yet. We are still experimenting. And that is why I'm saying there is a ticking time bomb. And if you look at the strategy we have to skill the youth, practice-oriented training in TVETs, that means we should prepare for about 80% of high school leavers to go to TVETs. But where are those TVETs? We have enough. And TVET training requires a lot of capital investment in terms of facilities because it is practice-oriented training. Practical hours would take more time in the curriculum. And that is also a good example we can draw from Germany. In Germany, the engineers there are mainly from Fachhochschule, which are universities of applied sciences. Those are advanced TVETs. So if you ask me from the perspective of a teacher, and hence keen on education and skills development, I would emphasize that we need adequate structures, thought leadership in the education sector, and let's ensure that there is meritocracy when we are forming those committees, and public participation. The youth must participate, not just giving them ready-made solutions that are imported without modification from elsewhere, because we have our own local idiosyncrasies we must adapt to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mwalimu. And just back to you, don't put off your mic yet. There has been a discourse in this country that what is taught in universities, in TVETs, is not consistent with what is required in the job market. What could be your argument over the same? Are we teaching for the market, or we are teaching off what is required in the market?
I'll draw on my experience, having carried out a nationwide survey in Kenya in the year 2021 with support from the German Academic Exchange Service through the African Center for Career Enhancement and Skill Support, that is ACCESS. And I can humbly say here that there was a competition for African lecturers on ideas to enhance youth employability through higher education. And that is where TVETs are, and universities and colleges. And this competition is what won me a grant to carry out that nationwide survey. And appallingly, the youth was saying that only 24% of them are ready for the market. And I interviewed youth aged 18 to 35. So there were university students, college students, and those who are young professionals in industry. So look at that, only 24% ready for the job market. And 56% of them were in STEM-oriented disciplines. And we are saying we want to be a STEM-oriented country. So if you look at that 24%, what of the 76%? So I'll agree with you that we are not yet at that point where we can say we are training for the market. And that is why we need structured mentorship to bridge that gap. And the founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, who is an engineer and also an economist, said that we are living in an era of talentism. Talent is now the ultimate capital. So how are we nurturing the talents of this youth? So we need to give them practice-oriented training with focus on the job market. And that is why I blame the industry. Why? Because the industry is waiting for the students to go, or young professionals to go there for attachment and internship. The industry should also come into the universities and do something there, build labs. So it is a two-way, a system thinking approach. It is not just universities and TVETs, what are you doing for industry? We want to see more of industry presence at universities, and we need more of the people we call pro-academics, those who are practice-oriented and are qualified enough to teach at universities. So let's have industry practitioners who are qualified to teach at universities also participating in training, so that they are not on the blaming side, but they can be part of the collective responsibility of skilling the youth. And I'll finish by saying that we must upend our philosophy. Some people cast aspersions on lecturers. They say that those who cannot do teach. But that is not how it is in philosophy. Even Aristotelian philosophy says that the natural progression of mastering any discipline is, first of all, learn it, then practice it, then teach it. So teachers should be at the highest level, and so we need practice-oriented teachers as well. And we need to expose our lecturers to practice-oriented training and industry exposure. Thank you.
Thank you, Naashan. I want to go now to Dr. Philip. In our discussions, I love the mastery of the region, the various regions within the Nyanza region. Nyanza has potential in various areas, such as in the blue economy, the green economy. Mention them, quite a number of potentials within the Nyanza region. How well are the institutions within Nyanza that provide education, mentorship, coaching, skills enhancement, how well are those institutions prepared to feed the young people with the required knowledge so that they are able to uptake the existing opportunities within the Nyanza region? Do we have young people who have gone through universities and colleges going to uptake opportunities within the blue economy, or these are young people who are in the streets looking for employment? How from your experience within the Nyanza region, what do we see within that perspective, sir?
Well, thank you very much, CEO. And I want to respond to your question, but also build on the conversation that has been started by Doc here on employability skills. And as Corporate Career Academy, the gap that we're trying to close is employability skills. People emerging out of our training institutions, but not meeting the demand or the expectations of employers. And in 2023, when we rolled out our first ever East African Employability Summit, the Federation for Kenyan Employers came with their skills survey report, which was showing that there are particular gaps that are still existing that employers are pointing at. But again, even before that, the Inter-University Council for East Africa had shown that about 54% of our graduates were not meeting the employability skills requirements, so they were not employable. But part of these things that we're looking for are soft skills, such as time management, teamwork, communication, and such like the things. So critical thinking, for example, how are our institutions curing that gap? And so as an academy, we are partnering with institutions across the country, across East Africa. And again, I would say today, within the African context, we've worked with the African Union to entrench employability skills. There is a program the African Union is running called 1 Million Next Level, which is targeting to create 300 million opportunities for young people across Africa on employment, entrepreneurship, engagement, health and well-being. So the 4 E's plus H. Now, bringing this to context in the Kenyan setting, in the Nyanza region setting, I would say that our institutions of higher learning or training are not uniquely prepared today to deal with the 21st century challenges of employability, because we focus mainly on the traditional curriculum as set to train without responding to the market. And when we mention the industry, it's an area where we are supposed today to train with industry, not for industry. So with industry means that you're getting feedback from the industry. So institutions around this ecosystem and across the country must train with industry, provide nodes through which the private sector can give feedback to you as an institution to revamp your curriculum, so that bit by bit you're walking the journey, so that they don't expect to receive graduates from you that are not designed to respond to the challenges or to solve problems at the workplace. How do we do this? There are curriculum that are designed without internships, for example, or attachment. And I'm a product of a course that did not have an internship program or an attachment program. So if you're not really going out of your space as a student or as a learner to sharpen your skills, to practice anywhere when you get opportunity, then basically you're going to be surprised at the tail end of your training, because you're basically coming to industry having not worked or immersed yourself in a job environment before. So what we must do is that the curriculum that were designed in the 90s, in the 80s, must quickly be reviewed. And in reviewing, we must bring industry as part and parcel of that program. There is what we're calling mentorship as a part and parcel of practice and training. How do we mentor students for industry? Today we are running a program with the Diamond Trust Bank, giving them students every twice a year, in January and September. But now we're going to do it in May and September during the holidays, where we select 100 students from across learning institutions, higher learning institutions in Kenya, and they post them across their branches in the country for 2 weeks to understand how the corporate environment operates, how somebody should operate, for example, in a banking setting. And a bank is not just the traditional bank where we know it as a financial institution. Bank has many other components that they're dealing with. And so we're not sending just the ordinary students in Bachelor of Commerce disciplines or accounting disciplines, but even teachers, even engineers, because those are occupations that are available within the banking industry. So with that good example, opportunity created by Diamond Trust Bank to work with us as Corporate Career Academy to link them with learning institutions, we are calling more of our institutions across the region to respond to such opportunities and bring students, and not just with one employer, with many other employers and the private sector as it is as a whole. The other thing that we must respond to is the curiosity of a learner in the Nyanza region. We are known as some of the most talented brains across the country. We are known as some of the people that are multi-gifted. Outside academia, you have sports, you have innovation, and we're encouraging institutions today that any learning institution that is going to solve problems of the 21st century must have what we are calling an on-campus innovation hub or a TVET maker space, where you don't just teach technical courses on engineering, but a student with an idea on innovation do not have a lab or a space to practice. Just like we've designed laboratories in high schools and in colleges and universities, we must design what we are calling on-campus innovation hubs and TVET maker spaces to create entrepreneurial culture, because in your realization, again, CEO, and you are a CEO of a fund that is supposed to support young people to get into the entrepreneurship space, support their startups and support their ideas to, grow and get out there as employers. We know for a fact today that 6 out of young people in Africa are without jobs. Kenya is talking about 1 million people emerging and entering the job market. Basically people that have graduated from our universities, TVETs, and people that are falling out of learning institutions, whether they complete or they don't. So where do they go to? The public sector cannot absorb them. The private sector cannot absorb them fully. But we have an opportunity where each and every person in this space can be their own boss and run their own space. So in partnering with funds such affirmative action funds such as yours, and counties must also lead in this space. I'm proud to have chaired the Kisumu East Sub-County Youth, Women and Persons with Disability Fund, which was a component of the entire county funding. And we were able to design a co-creation model where the county invests a given amount and the private sector financial institutions could offer even 4 times the amount. So in 2021, our concept note yielded another 500 million from one of the commercial banks, I believe KCB, that is sponsoring this event. But counties are unable, for example, Kisumu County is unable to unlock that fund because we don't have regulations. So county governments, just as we focus on learning institutions, must respond to the need of the young person in the 21st century and the Nyanza region especially. And see, I'll conclude by saying, Nyanza is particularly important and special in our demographics, as was demonstrated the other time in the main plenary, because of our population density. But the other thing that is very fundamental is our dependency ratio. Some of our counties here have a huge disease burden. When we have a huge disease burden, what it means is that most of our young people have to take responsibility as leaders of households or to respond to providing for a number of family members that are greater than the national average. When we're talking about dependency ratio of about 6.6 or 6.7 at the national level, in Kisumu County, for example, it's 8.7, which is 2 points above the national average. So to get more young people into entrepreneurship, into innovation, into working for themselves would help us to reduce that employability space and entrepreneurship space. But that has to be a partnership between learning institutions and financial institutions, affirmative action funds, which are also county-led.
Very pertinent, Dr. All the stakeholders must come together so that we design a solution for that. Now, building on your pertinent question that we have raised, Kenya produces close to 1 million young people to the job market every year. Madam Ruth, you have been an enabler, enabling young women leaders transit from university to practice. Now, from your experience, what other enablers are required so that we are able to deal with the challenge of youth unemployment within this country and this region?
Allow me to answer your question as I respond and touch a little bit about from what the previous speakers have touched on. Now, for one, when we talk about the structures that are hindering or enabling young people to, get into the job market, I've always said that we have the best policies. We've got the best institutions such as Youth Fund. We've got the policies, the structures are there. But there's a mismatch, one, when it comes to the implementation of it. And two, there's an even larger mismatch when it comes to collaboration between the different entities, like Dr. here mentioned. So when you find a situation where a young person has not been involved in any volunteerism, they've not done any internship, and then you give them a loan because they've got a group, what's going to happen? They don't know how to manage those funds. If even as an intern they were not earning anything, they don't even know how to manage the little 5,000 they're being given so that they have something for lunch and something for transport. That's not a culture they have grown with. So you've thrown them into the deep end and you're now telling them, we've given you money, we want you to not only manage it, but we want you to make profits from this money that you're holding for the first time. So there's a mismatch there. And then when it comes to the requirements, just like Dr. also mentioned, you find that you're looking for, and young people, these are conversations that young people have been saying day in, day out. You are asking for someone who is 24 years old, but they needed to have had 10 years of experience. Where is it coming from? Where am I getting, as a 24-year-old, where am I getting experience of 10 years? Now, I was part of a program called Youth Bunge, where we designed it to give young people who are interested in getting into the legislative space an experience of what that looks like, one, and two, to help them be able to oversight. So what Youth Bunge did is it brought together young people from a particular region and it took them to the county. So we did that in Homa Bay County for Nyanza region, we did that in Murang'a County for Central, we did that in Mombasa County for Coast. And at the end of the program, the young people would always say, so if I want something to be put in the budget, where exactly, at what point should I raise this? And that means they don't even know that. We went to a meeting with the National Youth Council, and after presentation, one person asked us, let me ask you, what is the role of an MCA? So that goes to tell you that there is a huge gap when it comes to also just, we've got the institutions, but do we know what those institutions do? Do we know how to get ourselves into those institutions? The assumption from our perspectives as enablers and as people from the legislative and policy sector is that people know why these institutions exist. They know how to get into those institutions, but that is actually wrong. And that's why when we sit and do policies, when we sit and do structures without having conversations with those young people, there is a mismatch, because we sit from a point of assumption where we are assuming we know what needs to be done and how it should be done. But the people on the other side are saying that's not what our problem is. Our problem is that, one, we don't, even if you tell us to get into entrepreneurship, do we have access to market? You're not showing us how to access market. We are not getting collateral-free loans, for example. We are not getting financial training on how to manage our financial, on how to manage our skills. So when we come together as a group, we don't know how to go. So we are not having the conversation with those young people that we are saying we are creating jobs for them, we are creating opportunities for them. So we are working from a point of assumption and not having conversations with them. It's also very important to note also that when we talk about a holistic approach to employment, but government can only do so much. However, they have the responsibility of ensuring that there is a conducive environment for the job creation by, inviting foreign and local investors, ensuring that there are tax incentives for, organizations such as DTB that are partnering with them should be able to get some tax incentives so that other organizations can also say, we also would like to partner with them so that we are able to take in more people. So DTB takes some, another organization takes some, another company takes some, then they get that experience. They're able to get, we're able to get as many of them as possible to be able to do those internships and to volunteer. But we don't have that culture. you'll always see that there are more people looking for internships or intern opportunities than there are organizations that are looking for them. And so I think for me, the two major issues is that, one, we have a mismatch when it comes to what is needed and what we are doing, and two, the structures are there, but there's no implementation and there's no awareness. We've got many people who do not know that these institutions exist or why these institutions exist.
Thank you, Ruth. Before I give audience to ask some questions based on what we have discussed, still Ruth on the mic, I want to, based on your assessment and your experience in governance, how well, in the context of Nyanza, how well have we opened space in leadership for the young people? How well have we done it? Are young people properly involved in the leadership within this region? If not, what is the missing link? And what should we do as stakeholders towards enhancing that participation by the young people?
In my experience, and it is good that I reiterate that this is not research-based, but it is based on my experience. We've got a mentorship problem in Nyanza. Why I say this is because I hold an annual women's boot camp every year that seeks to bring, we do it with Young Women Leaders Connect, that seeks to bring young women who are in the leadership space. And leadership is broad. Those who are in political parties, those who are in governance, those who are in business, those who are in the market. So young women who are in leadership spaces. And we bring them together for about 3 days and look for people or leaders who can come and speak to them. Top of my head, I can tell you within Nyanza, we've got only 3 female legislators that are always available. So year in, year out, you're almost sure that when it comes to this area, we are getting the same leaders. And we send an invite to as many of them as possible. So we do have a mentorship problem. Why I also say that is because if you look at what is it called? If you look at the perception that a number of people have online of our area, you will always know, and it could be stereotyping, but stereotypes also come based on perceptions of people's experiences or how you have branded or marketed yourself as a county. They will always say, in County X, those people are very lazy, they don't work. Those people, if you use their services, they will treat you as if they don't want to be served. So what does that tell you? That already, as an investor, if I am coming to set up something in Kisumu, then I know that this is the kind of, and I'm just using Kisumu as an example, this is the kind of workforce that I'll have. So I'll either need to bring in my own workforce, or I'll need to put the threshold very, very high. But if we had people who are mentoring these young people who are in businesses, then I think we would have a different story. If we had, different training programs that would just help them be able to go through thorough training of how do you resource mobilize, how do you relate with people, how do you relate with customers, then it would go a long way. If you look at a lot of our young legislators, because I'm the former head of programs of the Kenya Young Members of County Assemblies, and we would work with all MCAs elected and nominated across the country. When it came to the young members of county assemblies within Nyanza, their stories would be a bit difficult, and you would see that the return rate of the young people is very, very low. And look at it just right from 2013. Those young people who are nominated MCAs, where are they now? Those people who are nominated MPs, where are they now? We should be able to see that those young people are now either elected or are serving as CECs in their counties, or are having leadership programs that are then able to empower young people who are also in the space to also get in. We have young people also, they might not be in governance, but they're in the development sector, they're in the governance, they're in the civil society space. And they really help when it comes to the role of oversight, for example. And they also help when it comes to, looking for development partners who can come and invest in the county, but they don't have that go-to person. They don't have that person who can tell them, this is the channel to use, this is the right time and right place to oversight. This is who you speak to when you have, an NGO that wants to bring in computers. For example, right now, when you have a development organization that wants to bring in, let me use computers as an example. You tell them, I have land, I have space, I need you to bring in those computers to train people. The taxes are so high that you would rather buy from Kenya, but how many organizations have that? They have the space to be able to train those young people, but they don't, the taxes are too high, and that's why I talked about tax incentives earlier on. So I think mentorship is one of the key challenges that we have, and that's why we don't have a high return rate of young people in our leadership spaces. But with the kind of trends I'm seeing from the senator of Migori currently, I think if more leaders are able to take that approach of mentorship and just linking young people within the counties to opportunities that they get, then we could be on a trajectory to be able to close that gap.
Thank you so much. As I pick some few questions from the audience, kindly, if the mic is on, as we pick, let me ask Daktari. Entrepreneurship is one of the vehicles through which jobs can be created. What incentives could you recommend, especially to the county governments within the Nyanza region, so that we are able to make entrepreneurship attractive to the young people? Instead of them looking for jobs in the streets, they are able to, start business within the Nyanza region.
Thank you, CEO. Today, every other county government has what we call a county bursary to fund education. And that must be a rule that every county must have an innovation fund to support young people in the innovation space. Counties must have youth, women, and persons with disability funds, just like we have in the national government. So no county government today should exist without an affirmative action fund that supports innovation, that supports entrepreneurship, and no county government should exist without innovation hubs. We take so much resources into social halls, rescue centers, which are very good institutions and very good structures. But I dare you, move to any county and look at the activity in the social halls, and look at the activity in the rescue centers. You realize that a rescue center is rusting without any one single person that is supported in terms of what the facility is meant for. But if these were converted into innovation hubs and spaces where we teach entrepreneurship skills, they would be ever busy, streaming with young people. And like we say, today, former president of the US, Biden, says internet is infrastructure. What you need to equip these spaces with, like Ruth here says, are computers, but with internet. Because we are also promoting, other than entrepreneurship, remote working. Excuse me. Remote working and digital economy, which is driving quite a huge population into work. So navigating around the entrepreneurship space, but also linking into the global infrastructure and ecosystem where opportunities are provided for here and elsewhere. Excuse me. So what I'm saying is, if you're going to run county governments the traditional way, we are going to fail the youth the usual way, because we are driving and pumping more money into high school education, basic education, really. The issue should be focusing on tertiary education. The counties, again, have a mandate to run vocational institutions, village polytechnics, and so forth. What are we teaching in our village polytechnics? Are we traditionally treating mechanics as usual and it's business as usual? Why don't we teach entrepreneurship on the side of the courses that we are teaching in technical, but incentivize these courses as well? I said, for example, as a proposal, if you have 5 students that have been enrolled in motor vehicle mechanics in your village polytechnic or in your vocational training institute, when they exit, before they graduate, they must come up with a project. And part of their project is that they must also register business. Yeah? So that they have a company at the exit or at the tail end of their school. So somebody leaves an institution with 2 certificates. One is their technical training certificate saying that this is a motor vehicle mechanic. But the other one is that we've registered a business and there are 5 of us joined on this business. You can come back to the same county or go to an institution around you and ask for business and work on it. Or you can start your own garage with that business registered at the exit of the school. And I think the bank that is also supporting this event, the KCB Bank, has a foundation that has led by example in this case. If you look at the Tujiajiri program, it's designed to reflect exactly what we are trying to mirror. And so counties must learn on this. We're not just going to talk about entrepreneurship. Teach entrepreneurship in our vocational institution and have an affirmative action fund for entrepreneurship and innovation, just as we have bursaries and education funds.
Thank you, Dr. for that. I want to pick some few questions from the audience.
Sorry, Josiah, before they go, can I just touch on that a
okay,
little bit?
yes, Madam Ruth, in a minute.
Very quickly, I had wanted to actually speak on it. I think some of the other things is an integration program. If counties can have an integration program, because we have a lot of young people in rural Nyanza. You know, we have the towns, but we tend to forget about the rural areas. So within rural Nyanza, there are a lot of young people who are arrested for various causes, but they're arrested for short periods of time, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and the likes. But when they come back, there's a problem integrating them into society. So if we could have training skills that will help them transition and then be integrated into society, whether it is through, you know, the Juakali industry and the likes, then it can really help to close that gap. I think the other issue that I would also wanted to highlight, still under making it attractive, is jobs like agribusiness need to be made fashionable, because there is a certain perception, and it has been there for a while, that agribusiness is for the older folks who are retiring and the like. So we need to make it fashionable and entice young people to join agribusiness. Private sector, having conversations with private sector, because before every election year, we have county governments, or we have candidates who are vying for the different executive positions, sitting down with organizations like KEPSA, CAM, Trademark, to have conversations of how they can come on board. And the private sector will then tell them what they would want should you then take the seat. But after the elections, we never have this conversation again to tell them, now I have gotten the seat, and I remember what you asked for, but this is how I would like you to come on board as private sector to help me sort out some of these issues. And finally, I think engaging NGOs and development partners like GAIN. For a very long time, they were actually looking for county governments to help them install cold rooms in the markets. And they had it advertised. They did not approach them one-on-one. They just had it advertised. But I will tell you that since 2017, GAIN put up its first cold room in the market in Machakos this year. And that just goes to tell you that we are not aggressive in looking for a number of these opportunities.
Thank you, Ruth. I'll come back to you and you tell us how to make a Greek fashionable and cool. I'll come back so that I pick one or two. Who is the first one to go? Based on what we've said and perhaps what's outside, we allow, as long as it's within the youth space. Karibu.
Asante, thank you, the panelists and moderator, for great discourse. My question or concern is, are we being accurate when we equate university to training for industry? That a university exists to train for industry, because I think university, in my view, could have much more purpose. But I see this trend where university is simply reduced, where this is what the market wants. How about if the market does not know what they want? So that there is austerity measures in thinking. University is no longer asked to think. Go find what the industry is doing, what the industry want, come and develop students to go do that. Is that all the university is supposed to do, or we are underselling these learning institutions?
Thank you, Dr. Dan Kanajuan, for such a good question. Can we answer that one first? And I want to come to Nashon. Do universities exist just to teach for the market?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I know Professor Juang is a lawyer. And sometimes we say the majority have their way and the minority have their say. University is multifaceted because we have postgraduate education at university level, where research is emphasized. But look at our country. Are we at that level where we need so much of high-level research, doctorates and all that? So the first point of entry upon graduating from university for this youth, they take up undergraduate level jobs.
More entrepreneur is what I have seen is the difficulty to have young people in agriculture business, ICT business, where, you know, I've been trying to push people to become entrepreneurs, sponsor some projects, is to speak the same language. When you're an investor, you like figures, you like to try an Excel sheet to see how much money can you invest, how much return, etc. And I think there is sometimes a lack of knowledge of the basic tools to be used to discuss in terms of becoming an entrepreneur. It's not just a spirit, it's just not just a way of living. You also need the basic, like other people have been highlighting it, knowledge of specific tools. And I guess insisting on entrepreneurship training, which exists, for example, in Europe. I mean, you have to have some kind of training before starting your own business, even if you are from agro or ICT. I think something like developing that further could be a help.
Very, very pertinent, sir. Training for entrepreneurship is very key, not just going into it without understanding what you want to do. We really appreciate your contribution, sir. Teresa Oduol from the US, just in 3 minutes, let's see what our contribution is on this subject.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Oduol, and I'm excited to discuss the mobilization of youth in Nyanza, particularly through the lens of sponsorship and mentorship. First, I'd like to extend my appreciation to the organizing committee for inviting me to join this important event, and a special thank you to all the conference organizers who worked tirelessly to make this gathering possible. And so here I just have a brief overview of today's agenda. So I'll introduce myself and outline the key topics, then we'll dive into some key definitions and examples, followed by a reflection on how these concepts fit into the broader conversation around investment. So a little about me. I'm Teresa Oduol, based in Boston, Massachusetts, which is located on the east coast of the U.S., about 4 hours north of New York City. I'm a researcher who focuses on topics concerning health equity. Outside of my professional work, I'm deeply passionate about mentorship, which has been one of the most rewarding aspects of my career. I've had the privilege of mentoring secondary school students every other weekend, focusing on college readiness and skills development, in addition to mentoring university students. And so in this video, I'll begin by introducing the key stakeholders involved in youth development and explore where mentors and sponsors fit within this ecosystem. Then I'll define mentorship, distinguish it from sponsorship, and then discuss why each is so important. And then next I'll offer suggestions on how we can integrate mentorship and sponsorship opportunities into investment strategies for youth development. So here we have an overview of the key stakeholders involved in youth development, both in the context of education and skills development, with youth at the center. Fortunately, many of these stakeholders are present at the conference today. So for any youth in the room, I encourage you to take a moment to look around and visualize the diversity of sectors represented here. As we look at the landscape of youth development in Kenya, it's important to recognize that this is a multi-dimensional and collaborative process involving a wide range of stakeholders. And ultimately, the youth are at the center of this development ecosystem. And youth leadership initiatives should help empower young people to take ownership of their future, enabling them to contribute meaningfully to their communities. And so then this brings me to another key point. What role do mentors and sponsors play? Where do they fit into this ecosystem? And so then next, I'll transition into defining mentorship and sponsorship to better illustrate their role in youth development. So let's start with mentorship. So what do we mean when we define mentorship? The definition I'm offering centers on an interaction where advice and guidance are exchanged from a more experienced individual, the mentor, to someone seeking support, the mentee. And typically the mentor will have expertise in the area where guidance is requested, and the goal is to create a space for the mentee's personal and or professional growth. And so mentorship can take both formal and informal forms. Formal mentorship is often via institutions, or such as an academic advisor or work supervisor with defined goals and expectations for meeting and tracking progress. Whereas informal mentorship can typically emerge through mutual interest between individuals, offering more flexibility and structure and a focus on the mentee's self-identified growth. And so, of course, mentorship can also occur in different formats, such as one-to-one, peer-to-peer mentoring, or in a group setting. And so successful mentorship depends on several key elements, but some of the most important that I identify here are clear communication and mutual expectations, and defining the relationship and setting clear expectations from the outset is essential. And so oftentimes mentorship is often thought of as a one-way relationship where the mentor guides the mentee, but in reality it's a two-way street where both parties grow and learn. Mentors gain fresh perspectives, develop stronger communication skills, and even learn from the mentee's unique experiences and insights. So in essence, mentorship is about mutual development, where both the mentor and mentee contribute to each other's success. So now let's move on to sponsorship. So in sponsorship, the goals of mentorship are actualized through the actions of a sponsor. So a sponsor will typically be a seasoned and influential professional who uses their resources to create opportunities for the sponsee that are crucial for their career development. And it's important not to confuse sponsorship with mentorship. While mentorship focuses on guidance and advice to help shape a mentee's decision-making, sponsorship goes a step further by providing actionable connections that lead to career growth. So, for example, a mentor might suggest you consider employment at a particular company and encourage you to network with professionals there. A sponsor, on the other hand, will actively reach out within their network to explore job opportunities where you might be a good fit and open doors for potential career paths or further connections that could lead to future opportunities. And sponsorship is vital for career progression because it directly leads to measurable outcomes, such as job placements, promotions, and leadership opportunities. And it can be part of an organization's workforce development program or be formed naturally through mutual interests and relationship building. So here I provide a simple summary of the differences between mentorship and sponsorship. Both are people who are your advocates, but they play distinct roles. And so here I would just like to pause for a moment and ask everyone in the room to think of a very successful person you know, someone maybe you look up to. And if you were to ask them, how did you achieve the success that you have today? Most often they'll credit someone who gave them a chance, who offered guidance to navigate the workplace, and crucially, someone who invested in them. And I want to emphasize that, someone who invested in them. So beyond academics, jobs, and opportunities, it's this personal investment in people that is vital to both personal and professional growth. And this investment is something we should encourage to be passed down. So let's return to the question of where mentors and sponsors fit into this ecosystem. The answer should be very clear. They're everywhere. They're in all of our interactions. And what do I mean by a hidden curriculum? And so the hidden curriculum in mentorship and sponsorship refers to the unspoken, informal lessons and knowledge that mentees or proteges gain through their interaction with mentors and sponsors. And so this includes things like learning about workplace culture, social norms, power dynamics, and unwritten expectations that are not typically taught, but are critical for success in a given field or organization. And it often involves learning how to navigate the system beyond formal guidance, and oftentimes gives people an advantage to navigating and succeeding in new opportunities. And so, for any youth watching this, I challenge you to leave here with at least 2 contacts from people you've connected with through the mutual interests Make sure you reach out to them. And the same goes out to working professionals in the room. Let's not leave this conference collecting business cards in our pocket with no plan to build a meaningful connection. And don't be afraid to send follow-up messages as people are busy. And always remember that a mentorship relationship must be grounded in authenticity and a genuine desire to learn, grow, share, and guide. And so this brings me back to why is this important? And so the data is clear. First, most people land jobs through networking. And second, many job opportunities aren't advertised publicly. They're often offered through developed relationships. And similarly, promotions and leadership opportunities often come through networks with names being passed around within those circles. So as a youth, it's essential to make yourself visible and be confident in meeting new people, as mentorship and sponsorship are direct pathways to opportunity. So here, when we look at investment opportunities, let's illustrate the default model of many investment pathways, which typically include where investors and other stakeholders focus on expanding access to education, along with infrastructure investments aimed at creating local jobs and paths to promote sustainable employment opportunities.
Thank you, Madam Theresa Oduol, for her presentation. And we appreciate our contribution in this topic. We want to conclude, and there's another session coming in, so kindly, my panelists, just in a moment, in one line, what do you think is the way forward? How do we deepen youth engagement in the Nyanza development agenda? Just a sentence, just a line, as we close.
Okay, absolutely, and thank you guys so much, and thank you for your time and for all the panelists who touched on these important topics as well. So I guess the big question here, and I'll be very brief, the big question we want to sort of take away is, how can investors actively contribute to fostering mentorship and sponsorship, and integrate these into investment strategies to support the growth and development of young people? And so the answer and how I would think about that is that we should really be considering pairing infrastructure investments with pathways that cultivate mentorship and sponsorship opportunities. And one example would be this very conference that we're in here today, bringing people together to share knowledge. As some panelists had mentioned, infrastructure investments can also include guaranteed slots for internships and job placements. We can have career development expos at universities where we have members of industry come speak to students. And so really bringing people together is the key for that. But it needs to start from an early age, and we just need to foster a culture of mentorship and sponsorship. And so with that, I'll end. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Theresa. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good. Any conclusion, therefore?
Mentors are volunteers, and as such, we need more people to volunteer in Nyanza to mentor the youth. And let's not look at mentorship as a unidirectional enterprise. We also have reverse mentorship, as she has mentioned, and peer-to-peer mentorship. So let's create more of these spaces where the youth can also mentor themselves as peer-to-peer mentorship, exchange programs, and also the older people to ensure that they are also taking up in the youth development space. So as we talk about youth engagement, I'll say this. From the African development perspective, the bank has a strategy now ongoing that states that we have to really invest in the young people, and that's what the World Bank again is looking at. If you look at the strategy of the African Union, particularly on within the youth, the women, gender and youth directorate, the AU is running, like I said, 1 million next level, which is targeting to create opportunities for 300 million young Africans in the 4 areas, 4 E's and H. What we're talking about is entrepreneurship, employment, education, engagement, health, and well-being. We have an opportunity as a region, and especially by county governments, like I said, to entrench entrepreneurship, and that was reinforced by one of the members of the audience here. We must teach entrepreneurship
in our TVETs, in our vocational institutions, so that we don't just train job seekers, but also job creators. And I'm glad that Honorable Nyikal has established a technical training institute ground up in an area where it did not exist before. So if we're able to do that per constituency, per ward, per region, we're going to develop skills that can not just solve local problems, but regional problems that we're talking about in employment and entrepreneurship. And like I said, and this is particular to county governments, just like we prioritize bursaries, we must prioritize affirmative action funds in innovation, entrepreneurship that would support the young people to create for themselves employment opportunities. And overall, let us all be mentors. Traditionally, we'll take the definition of an experienced person supporting a younger person, but that's really not the case. In mentorship, we're also talking about peer-to-peer mentorship, where we'll encourage youth engagement at their own level to be peer mentors. But again, in our spaces, let us create spaces for volunteers. Young people here outside are looking for spaces just to get engaged, not looking for payment necessarily, but a place to learn, a place to be coached, a place to be mentored, a place to contribute, and a place to add value. So can we create spaces in our offices, in our institutions, and let county governments design volunteering programs, just like we are designing internship programs, so that we're not just hearing about national youth employment programs. We have today what we're calling the NYOTA program, which is National Youth Advancing for Transformation. It's the former KIOP. Can we design such local programs looking from the strategies of the African Development Bank, strategies of the AU with the 1 million next level, to the county level, to the constituency level, to the local level? Because young people are ready and willing to engage, but we must provide those nodes for them to plug in. Thank you.
Thank you, Daktari. Finally, Madam Ruth, in 10 seconds.
I will try summarize that, belaboring the point. Very quickly, one, I will say Youth Service Act. There is a need for this, not just drafting the act, because I'm aware some counties don't have it years later, but also amending it necessarily to reflect the new trends and new interests of young people. Two, research and anthropology for investors within the various counties, and I'll say that because of what the investor in Soris talked about. I mention anthropology specifically because once you know how people live, then you know the best way to train them and the best way to instill those entrepreneurial and soft skills such as the power of networking. Three, collaboration and conversation. I mentioned earlier about collaboration between the private sector and county governments pre and post election, and conversation between the young people that we are trying to get jobs for and the legislators, the policymakers, and the likes. Finally, mentorship, and I'd like to challenge every investor here and everyone in a leadership position here to just look for just 10 mentees for this year and see how that goes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my panelists. Thank you, the audience. The bottom line is, let's do all what we can to ensure that young people are involved in both regional and national development. Your moderator for this session was Josiah Moriasi, the CEO, Youth Enterprise Development Fund. We have a booth the other side. We are one of the enablers in what we have been discussing here. Kindly, you have a chance. Go and see what we do and seek help from our side. Thank you so much. May God bless you.
efforts towards improving their legal and regulatory framework. So I'll go through that briefly. And basically one of the major actions that the region has taken is to come up with what they call the LREB. This is the Lake Region Economic Bloc. So the idea behind this bloc is for this region to put together resources and strategies so that they can work together in a coherent manner to achieve social, political, and economic development. They've realized that it may not be possible for individual counties to independently pursue economic development. Therefore, it's necessary for the region to come up with a framework that through which they can work together, and this is where LREB comes in. So you can see there the governance structure and a few other things there. So what the counties basically did was to come up with Lake Region economic legislations, and each county basically passed their own acts. And after passing this particular acts at the individual county levels, it also became necessary to have an overarching framework. So the Senate is working on an overarching legislative framework which can operationalize LREB in the 14 counties. I've seen Honorable Nyikal here. I don't know whether the Senate has, I don't know how far the Senate has gone in terms of coming up with overarching legislation to support the Lake region. I know you sit at the National Assembly, but probably you're having some discussions around this. Yeah. So these are some of the challenges that we experience at the Lake Region Economic Bloc level. And you can see as outlined there in my presentation, there are various challenges, poor farm products, poor pricing in terms of farm products, high cost of farm inputs, etc. And I think the national government is trying to do something about the cost of inputs, like bringing down the cost of fertilizers and other related products. So this weak structures exposes the citizens to hostile market forces. And these are some of the gaps we are trying to cure through the necessary policy and legislative and regulatory framework. For instance, revenue leakages in counties. Because the money collected at the counties do not necessarily reach the county revenue fund, and it's necessary for the counties to come up with ways to reduce the leakages. So some of the areas that I've outlined here are possible areas through which we can improve the investment climate and business climate in the region. And this is where probably we need to come up with proper legal and regulatory frameworks to support the kind of economic development we are looking at in the region. So some of the areas that we identified include harmonization of laws and regulations. For example, when I was discussing with the people in the ICT sector, one of the problems they face, for example, when they're laying fiber network across the counties, you move from county A, you're told you need to pay 200,000 to lay your fiber network in that particular county. And then you move to county C and they tell you that they require 1 million for you to lay your fiber network. So this kind of discrepancies across the counties have had a negative impact on economic development, and specifically in the ICT sector, we have received complaints. And this is some of the things that our Honorable Nikal here and who else was here? I think Olago. No, Olago now is no longer in Parliament. Okay. So this is just a brief case study in terms of an international organization that has also attempted to come up with structures. And this is OECD. So this is just a brief outline of what they have done at the OECD level, just for comparative analysis. So in conclusion, we are saying that we need to do some work on this particular area of improving the policy, legislative, and regulatory framework as one of the areas that we need to work on to improve on our economic development in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omolo. Please go back to the slide on the Lake Region Economic Bloc. I think it's the first. Yeah, just go back. So I had the first slide. Yeah, on the institutional framework. Yes. So I had the privilege of drafting the legal instruments for the Lake Region Economic Bloc, and I think for the region, if you're talking about investment and development, it is the most important instrument. But as you correctly said, it's frustrated at the national level by the lack of an overarching legal framework. That is number one. But number two, I think the thing that we really need to emphasize is, in terms of governance, what we envisaged was a system that facilitated the participation of the members of the region in charting the path for how they want to develop, what kinds of investments that they want to have. And the good thing about the Lake Region Economic Bloc is that it gives a scale. A lot of investors will be looking, the kinds of monies or investment opportunities that they're looking for will not be available in single counties because of the requirement of scale. And which is why having a place where we can congregate as the people of Nyanza regularly, so that we have conversations with our government and say, look, this is what we want. Which is the best county to have a particular investment? Also, so that we don't duplicate our efforts. I think we will do much better that way. So going forward, I think the message is both to the county government and to the people that sit in the Senate, that the sooner that we get the remaining legal instruments that are required, the better. Let me now invite, sitting next to me is Dr. Mogeni, and then Professor Ojwang, welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Evans Mogeni. Dr. Evans Mogeni works with the Open University of Kenya, a new university in town. And until last month, I was working with the Micro and Small Enterprise Authority as a regional director, Kisii and Nyamira. I'm looking at this topic by giving a case study so that we can be able to look at it in a different perspective. When we talk about regulatory framework and issues affecting investment in Nyanza region, I want to look at this particular issue looking at an individual MSC or micro and small entrepreneur. I'm not looking at an investor coming out to invest in Nyanza, but I'm looking at that Moraa in Kisii who want to invest in Kisii and become an entrepreneur, then becomes an investor, and also encourage investment from other quarters to the region. I'm looking at Moraa who is having the skills, having the market, having the demand, but coming to invest in a small way in that particular county or in that particular place, which is Nyanza. Having worked with various entrepreneurs, some of them who have grown to become investors, can give particular example to Moraa, who I talked about, who wanted to establish value addition investment in a small way in Kisii. I said he had the skills, he had the demand, he had the market. Then that was back 2020 when we had the COVID, and we had a demand that bananas in Kisii were needed somewhere in Korea and were needed in European Union. When he started setting up that particular investment, then that's where the challenge began. One, he was asked to get a certificate, I don't know, from the county, which he got. Then another institution came. Then we had NEMA came until he gave up. She gave up. She's not alone. Several entrepreneurs I've seen in that sphere who give up because they are affected by the procedures, the legal and regulatory framework in our counties, not only in Kisii, but I know in Nyanza, where I've been able to work for the last 5 years. As a development economist, I tried to look at what can we be able to do to improve those procedures. I got an advantage of going to India to learn about intellectual property rights in Hyderabad and a particular institution called ICRESAT. And at that time, I looked at the landscape of India. And I came to learn India is the most populated country in the world with 1.4 billion population. And how many are we in Kenya? We are only 43. You can do the maths. But you go there, the rate of investment, they are able to feed the entire population, which is almost half the world. Investment procedure is superb. If you want to create a business and investment, it's working. If you wanted to create maybe an hub, you'll do it in less than a week. Come home. Where did we get it wrong? And particularly in terms of taxation, in terms of business registration, in terms of affordable financing, in terms of how do we navigate the issue of intellectual property rights? What about bureaucracy and corruption? I think my colleague must have mentioned about it in another perspective. What about specific regulations related to a particular investment? I gave an example of somebody who was actually investing in a small way, starting the value addition in banana, and how she was frustrated until she gave up the business. Then we have regulation about incubations, because incubations, like in India, we have the cottage industry, whereby in a small way they have created huge industries and investment base. So let's come home in Nyanza. What are we doing right, and what are we doing wrong? And what are some of the strategies that we can use to empower that Moraa so that she can become an investor, she can produce enough banana to sell to the world and have a bigger investor coming on board to Nyanza to invest. I gave that particular example. I was in another plenary session where we are talking about the Kisii soapstone. The Kisii soapstone particularly, it's not a soapstone because that's a misnomer. It is a unique stone which we can give it a name Kisii soapstone, particularly which needs a GI, a geographical indication, to differentiate it, to promote the value of it, to make it accessible to any market in the world. But what is the government doing about it? I can tell you, we are still struggling with how we can be able to get the GI, the geographical indicator. I think, or I can talk about the strategies and addressing such a kind of hurdles. We, as the county government, maybe the national government, talk about the procedures, making it easier the procedures of business registration so that entrepreneurs, the MSCs, can be able to invest, and they invest so that they can also promote other investors as they increase in economies of scale. We talk about taxation. You can agree with me, perhaps I don't have a problem with taxation, but I have a problem when you are taxed and you don't get the value of the taxes. You tax Mura, the national government tax Mura, we have several organizations taxing the same person, and you cannot be able to see what one tax has done to the same investor who is coming on board. Maybe we talk of policy representation and advocacy. We link these MSCs when you talk about investment. We lobby maybe the National Assembly so that they have a regulatory framework which is uniform maybe from the county level, the national level, which makes it simple for this investor to do something in her own way. We talk about financing and credit accessing. We have several bodies trying to boost investment of MSCs. But what is the impact? I can name several of them. We have MSEA under the Act 2012 MSC Act, which defines about the MSCs. I'm talking particularly about the MSCs because it's addressing the critical issue of unemployment, which is the main challenge that we're having, and also MSCs, which form almost 90% of our own employment, either formal or informal, and also supporting almost 34% of our GDP. So when I'm talking about MSC investment in Nyanza, I'm talking by extension how we can invest and also support the nation. So we have several institutions. I've talked about MSEA. We have the Hasra Fund, which came in. We have a youth fund. They're all supporting these investors. But how are we doing it? So we should build synergy and also try to come together and support the individual in a unique way, but the same investor, we have a particular way which is defined. You know, MSEA is contributing this, the other one is doing this, but we work in silos. We also need to have policies in terms of digital transformation and integration of technology. One thing that I can tell you about the experience I had from India, India perhaps is the second in terms of digital transformation in the world after US, the third after US and China. And we need also the policies and the regulatory framework to support such. We need also the collaborative effort in addressing these between the county government, the national government, and also the private public investment. Then we talk about capacity building. I believe when I was in that particular region, we could have our own session talking to the same investor, but doing it in a different way. So we need to have capacity building, where in one stop you are empowering these MSE. You talk about MSEA, KIE, KILDI, all the entire ecosystem. So that is MSE, as he invests or she invests, she'll be able to know where and to get support that she needs. I believe that's all I have about regulatory framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mogeni. Quite a lot to chew on. And I think for me, the thing that stands out are, it's a maze. If you're talking about if you are somebody who wants, for example, to export agricultural produce from Kenya, like the Morai example you're giving us, she faces all kinds of hurdles and bottlenecks, not just at the national level, but at the local level. And as you pointed out, they're not harmonized. And these also create opportunities for all kinds of people that want, something small, the corruption that is in our system. So in the end, you ask yourself, is this even going to be an investment that is worthwhile? But thank you very much. So there's quite a lot for us to reflect on in terms of enhancing the legal and regulatory framework. Last but not least, Professor Ojo.
Thank you, Professor Migai. I had a PowerPoint. I don't know whether it could be projected. Oh. It has not been mounted. Yeah. Yeah, I will not talk about everything. I will highly summarize. But let me introduce the topic. And I don't know, Professor Migai, whether you remember supervising a student who did work on informal cross-border trade between Tanzania and Malawi. And so that's the first time I interacted with the topic when Professor Migai here asked me to read and give a feeling of what is this student doing. And it became very interesting because up to that time, the name I knew was Magendo. And up to that time, what I knew is that my mother would give me stories after stories of how she went to Kaseka, that is Tanzania, to bring fish, how she went to Wasukuma, and how that trade is dangerous. It's not, you have to look for porous borders. If you are caught, the things get confiscated, everything get confiscated. How the supplier, the other side, were very nice, and they had formed relationship with Tanzanians, and they will come visit her. And so the disconnect between the law and the practice. And it really forced me to think, what do we get for staying around the border? What do we get in Sirare just because by sheer design, we come from counties or a province that are by the border. Does the law support? We are close to Busia border. We are close to all these other borders. How come several years later, even with the East African integration and all the laws, this business, highly done by women, remain small, remain risky, remain informal, and, so to speak, the famous Magendo. Yet, we talk of East African Community Law, we talk of regional integration, we talk of non-tariff goods, we talk of COMESA exception, we hear stories of how British American Tobacco has expanded and have taken advantage of the free trade and free movement of goods and people articulated in the East African Community Treaty. Yet, for the local, custom remain a terror where you find a porous border, you sneak in a few things you have brought, and you don't access the custom and the formal way. So the discussion here briefly, one discusses what pushes people, especially this trade is done mainly by women, into informality. Not to want to go through the formal process of declaring this is what I'm bringing to Kenya, this is what I have, this pay taxes. What is the push towards them continuing the business as informal? What are the factors? Number two, what do we miss as a region when those business remain informal, don't grow, remain dangerous? What do we miss in terms of development, employment opportunities, in terms of security threat? What does it expose to us as the frontier counties? Number four, what does it take from these traders? What could they have been if their business was supported, the policy recognized them, and all that? And that is the brief overview. Now, we know that when society wants to do something important, they look to law. But we also know that law can be conservative. And so just looking for law without the lens of minority, marginalized, is sometimes entrenching status quo. So we have to look at the law in terms of those groups that are excluded and wonder who is included and who is excluded. And I'm telling you, you will find that there's a lot of policies and laws that favor big business. Some even not Kenya, not benefiting the region of Nyanza or Western, but they are favored to easily cross the border and for their goods to go across. But rarely is the local, small, informal business favored. And so that is the challenge of this work. Finally, I've seen USAID do a lot of work between Tanzania and Malawi border to empower women. And therefore, we might not need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to bring those solutions here, whether it is empowering women, teaching them about the custom, helping them to understand, helping the policymaker to get their context and their worldview, because some of them, and usually they're less educated, demystifying what is going on, finding what tariff can be reduced, and helping them to do that business in a formal, in a way that can help them grow, that they can access credit and all that. Finally, you know that ties to the promise of better and the bottoms up, the tutaanzia chini. What is the Nyanza chini than informal cross-border trade? What is chini in Busia or Malaba or in Sirare than
that woman who is trying to cross border. Have you wondered how come the second-hand clothes come from Europe? No problem. But those which used to come from Tanzania, there is a lot of hindrance. And that shows the undercurrent of that the policies have favored others and have, so to speak, thrown others under the bus. So the formalizing informal cross-border trade for the empowerment of women, poverty elevation, peace building, in order to assist Nyanza to do what? Eradicate poverty, insecurity, and social inclusive development. And so that is what this can do if it is done well, that we can have an inclusive development. The clicker is not working. Huh? The clicker is not working. Do I point at the audience, at the slide, or where? Or I point at the screen? I tried pointing at the audience, it didn't work. Porous border. And so obviously the picture there. Okay. So several studies have suggested that for certain products, the value of informal trade exceeds the formal trade. And that is the irony of some of our laws. That what we are calling informal, in terms of volume, is bigger than the formal. Yet a lot of effort, a lot of policies are done for the small formal, and this one remain at the margin and periphery, and informal and magendo. And you know that with that label, everywhere you go, if you come from around the border, the police are there. And what are they doing? Looking for magendo. What have you sneaked across border? And you know the system that come. So look at all those efforts and look at the law that is governing the trade. Look at the promise of regional integration. In fact, most of the real regional integration is done by those traders. But the law do not recognize them. So what is informal cross-border? I think I've described it. It's better described here. What make them informal? Trade often lack access to information. As a result, they use informal crossing paths, porous places. Their business remain a subsistence activity, leaving them unable to transition to profitable and sustainable ones. Most of it is done by female. If it's properly supported, it can generate significant rural non-farm income. So that those borders can help us. The reason God in his wisdom put us, and Tanzania is here and Uganda is here, and become a catalyst for value chain creation. This benefit in turn can lower rural unemployment, slow rural urban migration, while empowering women, which are challenges because everyone is looking for employment in the urban. Yet, those borders are not harnessed, so that Nairobi and those who are in the central or within the country are not feeling or benefiting more from the borders than those who are actually set there. And those who are set there are suffering or getting the social backlash. So if you go to Nairobi Mlolongo, you'll find more border-like business, whether it is the lorries, the trucks, and the trailers. And for us, all we know is the vehicles cross around our land, they cross, and our business remain informal. It's important because you know poverty, broad poverty, and the ramification, so it can be source of employment, and what are the challenges? There is a lot of regulation, so the business is less profitable. It takes long to clear the border. So it is micro, small, medium-sized enterprise, the Mama Mboga version, actually. women-led business are concentrated in less profitable products. So some of the products they do as agriculture and textile, which have high level prevalence of NTMS. These are the tax exceptions, whether it's through COMESA. And that local lady doing Magendo, so to speak, cannot get there to negotiate. But those companies can lobby and get an NTMS. Additionally, women-led business face gendered supply constraint. This includes difficulty in accessing information about compliance, limited technical capacity, and higher share of unpaid work. As a result, they use informal crossing path. Their business remains subsistence. This benefit in turn lower rural unemployment. That's what it can do. Yet we brag of having so many laws. East African Community Goal of Economic Development, COMESA, and all that, but it is doing things for bigger trades and not smaller people. African borders are often porous with a significant volume of informal trade being done outside formal crossing. Informal trade can be very beneficial to those living near border as it provides livelihood. Crossing border through informal path can be dangerous. And you know, bribe and bribery and all that. Due to lack of information, lack of policy, they lack access to information, custom policy remain a myth, corruption, and what we call predatory behavior. So as we talk of sex for fish and all that, really we can also talk for sex for crossing and all that, the Jaboya system within the borders. How to address the complexity and the opacity of trade barriers. These are some of things that Tanzania are doing with their border with Malawi. Some of the solution and non-tariff measures, similar projects are there, way forward in policy. But what was important that I wanted to share, I didn't see it here, is I forgot about it, Prof. Thanks.
I wish we had the whole day to this. We can talk about this for days on end. You know, the funny thing about informal trade is that it is informal because of the challenges of the formal. So the question always is, how do you form? There are no benefits to becoming formal for them, because becoming formal for those, especially those women traders, means taxes. It means a very complex bureaucracy, which is what they're avoiding in the first place. And yet, if they stay informal, then they experience all these challenges that you pointed out. So the question then, I mean, is there really an easy solution to all of this? And yet, the funny thing is that, as you say, there's more informal trade across borders than there is formal trade. And now we are talking of the African economic, what is it called? What is the continental, the African continental free trade area, the AfCFTA. And because I do a lot of trade law work, trade law and investment work in the continent, what I find is that these smaller players, the MSMEs, the women traders, they're very bold. They're already going across borders. You'd be surprised the level of, the amount of trade that occurs, for example, between Kenya and South Africa, among these very small businesses, or Kenya and Ghana. Do you know that there's a trading house, there's a Ghana trading house on Mombasa Road in Nairobi, for example? So they do a lot of business, and yet they still face these constraints. The question is, why is it that we make policies for the big businesses, and yet most of the trade is done by by these smaller entities who are also very brave. Despite all of these challenges, they're very brave. They are, in the context of the AFCFTA, for example, when you talk to the bigger players, they're like, but you know, it's complex, the tax regime, we don't know this, we don't know the other, we are not going to do it. But the smaller players, them, they're going. We will discover all of those things, we will navigate them later. So how do you explain these complexities in cross-border trade? Unfortunately, on this panel, this is a manel. Unfortunately, we don't have a woman on this panel. So it would be very interesting to hear from the women what their experiences have been. So I think we have a bit of time. I don't know how much time we have, but perhaps we could, I'm sure you have lots of questions for the audience. Please go ahead. For the panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those thought-provoking discussions. My question is really basically around the issue of interests. Dr. Mogeni, you spoke of building synergies and removing the hurdles that people face when they want to invest. Sorry. My name is Roba Msilivi, an advocate working in the petroleum field. And from my little work that I've done in the government, I've realized that one of the greatest impediments when it comes to investment is the issue of interests. Dr. Mogeni, you spoke of building synergies and basically removing the hurdles that people face when they want to invest, especially in Kenya. Dr. Omolo talked of building an integrated economic, bloc within this region, basically to harness the potential that we have as a bloc. Yet, we know very well that each of these entities within the bloc have their own interests. Professor Ojwang spoke of corruption as one of the greatest impediments, even on these cross-border issues when it comes to trade. So my question is really, how do we address this issue of interest? Because we know at the back of all these things that we want to achieve, that is the socio-economic growth and development, every person has their own interests. How do we address this in the law so that at the end of it all, when each and every party has met their own interests, we still think of the mwananchi, who is at the lowest level? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Nyikal, I thought you had your hand up as well. Then I'll get to you.
Yes, I'm Dr. James Nyikal, Member of Parliament for Seme. Now, I was interested in this topic because I really want to know the legal status of LREB. And so I was interested to know what's the legal status and what is the legal framework. So my first question is, as it is now, maybe before I do that, I should answer your question, whether there's something happening in Parliament regarding this, maybe in the Senate, but in the National Assembly, I've not picked it, so I don't know. So as it is now, is LREB a legal entity that can get into legal arrangements, can transact, can borrow, and so on? Because that is really important if it is going to function even across the 14 counties. Then number two, about law, and law is always behind what people do. So people's needs change, and then they need to do things. And then the law follows them to ensure justice in how they are doing those things they want to do. That's, to me, the way it looks. So what we are seeing with this, people suddenly realize they want to move within these 14 counties, and they want to move freely, and they want to put their goods and monies together so that it is. And is there a law for it? So again, is it real? But the other one is, it will now have three elements. The law, as you said, it was passed by the past acts within the counties' assemblies themselves. So that is there within the counties. How do they relate within the counties? They are going to make a law that help them relate. But then there's another one. After they have made that law, how then does that entity relate with the national government within the bigger picture of the nation? Then a third one, this being they are really border counties. They border Uganda, then they border Tanzania. How do the laws that they make then relate with the regions across within East Africa? So that's why I was really intrigued because this is an important issue. So those are the issues that I would like to raise.
Thank you, Dr. Nyikal. We have answers for you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, my name is Lillian, and we are discussing critical issues which should be transforming our socioeconomic livelihoods. And I think we need to separate completely the mama mbogas and mama fish from those big entrepreneurs we are talking about, who can do business on internet. And of course, those are the ones mostly affected with the regulatory support system, the compliance issues. Because as Professor Duncan said, mama fish will cross, find the porous areas, and use those areas to bring her fish this way. And in that way, she's able to avoid any tariffs, any questions, but the risks she has to take. The other issue is about how supportive are our laws, our policies. We know that whereas the borders are porous, even the people who man the borders are porous, especially on the Kenyan side. I make it a point occasionally when I'm visiting Migori County to cross into Sirari, Sibania-Sirari border. And if you're driving through for a few hours, you know, you'll greet the officers, you'll tell them, hujambo nini, unaenda kufanya nini, na kwenda kule dukani tu. But if I were to carry a whole pickup full of rice, which is cheap from Tanzania, I'll pass with it. Only that I may not do it like Mama Mboga on every other day basis or weekly basis, because if I become a regular, definitely somebody will cite me from the Tanzanian side. I would never have to worry about the Kenyan side, because hapo nitajua vile ninapita. So we are very territorial, and in Tanzania it's very territorial about our borders and our laws, but on this side we have an issue. So I think even as we make these laws and think about how we use them, we must remember that yes, the mama fish does not have information, but the government must ensure something is done about educating our people, their obligations. If they have to prosper, then they have to know what they need to do. Otherwise, it will remain for the elite. And as you say, of course, I know of people who do business. Kenya, Ghana, they are selling sisal online. And they get support online. They know all the laws, they know all the loopholes, but they will still do their business, still have their meetings, and make their profits. It's not the same for people who are down. Thank you.
Is there any other, or we can, yes, and then the panelists can respond.
My name is Edna Arati. I am an advocate, and I want to align with what Ms. Rabida said regarding women. Of course, I'm equally concerned. I come from a place where even female leadership, you really have to struggle to be in that position, let alone now business. When we talk about the policies, and there's been a lot of talk about favoring women and the youth. It was just the other day, I had a client who was interested in borrowing a loan from the youth enterprise. And these are youth, young youth who wanted to access funding so that she can do business. But then she didn't have a good bank account, but she had all the documents that are required. And she was turned away and she was told, you know what, unfortunately, your account, your business account statement cannot favor you. And that's why she was asking me now, Wakili, how do I then access this money for me to be able to generate income, to have that account looking good, so that I can access, if they're saying they're supporting youth, where can a youth access this money, and especially a female youth, for them to have a good account? So as we talk about these policies, let's walk the talk so that at least we can bring up policies that, I know with every law there is an exception, but we have exceptions that should be able to align with the common mwananchi and be able to, if we want to talk about uplifting our economy across the country. So women still and the youth are extremely, extremely disadvantaged. So the laws should be able to be the pillar that supports especially these businesses, uplift them, because there's a lot of talk, but on the ground things are really, really different.
Thank you. I was keenly listening to you. I forgot that I was moderating. Let the panelists respond, and then if we have, how much more time do we have? All right. Who, I mean, Duncan, you can start, and then we come this way.
I think to integrate the various presentation, I think a way forward that even Dr. Nyikal was thinking about, when we are planning as a region, we must be aware of our strength, which is we border Tanzania, and that is a resource. So we can't plan like people in Mount Kenya who are within the central. And therefore, that is a good challenge even for the Lake Basin block. To what extent is it depicting our unique location as a strength? But even with that presentation, I think when you look at this region, when we look at the region, we must, if we empowered, for example, Kisumu International Airport, it will serve the region. It will serve Tanzania. It's here. People will now not need to do JKIA. They will prefer, if they are going from Tanzania, passing through Kenya, to have a layover in Kisumu and go. If we are planning tourism, we must think of Serengeti, Masai Mara, Simbi Nyaima, the soapstone of Manga, and things that will take someone across the border, because you are enhancing the value. If we are to think of transport, for example, even SGR, is the thinking is how to get the things across. So it's a good challenge and important that our laws don't, and our planning must reflect our unique situation. When Professor Migai was supervising the work, I looked at it and I was wondering, what is this to do with administrative law? And I just assumed because Professor Migai teaches administrative law, he has pushed the student to weave in. Then I realized, no, it's about, all these are administrative law. All these policies are administrative law. And so if women, because they are not empowered, they don't know language, they don't sit in the table and make the policies, are not sitting and discussing the East African community framework, regulations, then they are not represented. Their business remain out of the table and they remain informal. Yet, those who have good advocates and can have representation and come in those meetings as business community, which have cross-border interests, will be just the big business. And therefore, it is our responsibility to work, to mitigate, work to lobby, work to advocate that, you know what, there is value that we come from across border and we must benefit. Finally, yesterday you saw the president deciding that why do we vet those people from Northeastern when they are looking for ID? It is a miscarriage, and it is the tone of othering within Kenya. That if you don't come from around Nairobi, you are in the periphery and you are not recognized. And so what the president is doing, you can see the discussion, how radical it is. But he's saying these people are Kenyans like anyone else. Therefore, they can cross the border. Therefore, they can get an ID like anyone else. So that border has become actually a challenge for others. You come from border, we don't trust you whether you are a courier of Migori or Tanzania. Yet, it should be a big advantage. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I wanted to respond on the issue of interest. When we are talking about maybe counties or we are talking about intra-trade, that's between maybe Tanzania and Kenya. And maybe one of the challenges that we have is not that Kenya has shortage of regulation or policies. I remember a colleague of mine was actually doing the capacity building to one of their counties, and they wanted to raise investment level and also the kind of revenue that they were generating. Then there was an argument that Rwanda was doing better than Kenya. Then that particular county, they wanted to go and benchmark in Rwanda. But they didn't know the same person who was teaching them here was the same person who had developed some policies in Rwanda. So he said, yes, well, you can go and benchmark. And they planned and they went there. They found the same person who was doing the moderation was the same person who was actually teaching them. Then what were they benchmarking? Meaning, you can allow, maybe you can agree with me that we don't have shortage of regulations and policies in our country supporting investment. But how are we implementing it? And that's where we are talking about the interest. People want to implement this selectively, how they perceive it. When we talk about intra-trade, which we are talking about informal trade, which also is a replica proof about the internal trade and also the MSCs, the informal is more than the formal. What does it mean? There's leakage of revenue, there's service delivery, and we are complaining. Why can't we formalize this? How do we formalize it? You mentioned about formalization becoming so difficult than being informal. So they realize being informal is better than being formal. You talk about intra-trade, where we have the comparative advantage. The Mama Mboga you are talking about, Madam Lilian Saja, you are talking about Mama Mboga in Kianja, knows what is cheaper in Tanzania. And he knows what to do to cross the border without paying the taxes, and he can get it in Tanzania. The Tanzania knows what they cannot be able to produce in Kenya, in Tanzania, but they can get it in Kenya. So they do their own informal trade, and they fulfill what we call the comparative advantage that was given by Ricardo, that they know where it's cheap, where regulation is not so tough, and they can be able to do that. So one of the challenges we have is lack of capacity building and high level of ignorance, that somebody is talking about interest. Interest should not be there. In matters of trade, it's just implementation. If we have the rules, we implement them fairly. We talk about is MSCs when they are closing, for example, from Kisii to to Homa Bay. Then you find at Homa Bay, the junction, what they are doing, they want to discourage trade from Kisii, product going to the Kisii, not knowing that when you don't have measures which are so strict, you enhance trade or investment. But by they talk about interest, then they end up being so strict, discouraging trade, then we encourage informalization. And you realize one of the challenges that we have in investment and in terms of MSE generation of income is about formalization, because almost 80% of all the total MSEs, they are informal. Thank you.
Yeah, the question on counties having specific interests. Now, this can pose a challenge. However, one of the roles of the national government is to come up with national standards. And this is why, in the context of LREB, a bill which will originate from the Senate will be able to provide an overarching framework that can help LREB to effectively function. For instance, the way they are constituted now, for example, the controller of budget cannot approve funds to go to LREB. So what we told them is that they need to have the Senate fast-track this legislation that will provide an overarching framework. And it is in the interest of the counties to have harmonized laws and regulations in certain respects. For example, I gave the example in the ICT sector. If an investor is laying fiber across the country, and you see one of the pillars, under the bottom economic the transformation agenda is digitalization. It's in their interest to allow these companies to lay fiber across different countries. There should be no discrepancies that discourage investors from investing in our digitalization process. So the national government, I think to a large extent, has not effectively used their standard setting provisions, which is there in the Constitution. And Dr. Nyikal, I think once this bill comes from the Senate, I think it will be sent to you for concurrence at the National Assembly. So as it is now, LREB is facing various problems, and it has not been able to effectively operate without this overarching legislation. What was the other question? I think I got the question from Edna Arati. I think Professor Ojwang, he covered. I think Professor Ojwang covered the questions by our learned friend there, Edna Arati. I think Professor Migai has also done some work on LREB. Probably he'll also add something. Yeah, but.
So, Dr. Nyikal, as I was saying, I had the privilege of drafting the legal instruments for LREB. In my considered opinion as a draftsperson, there's absolutely nothing that stops the Comptroller of Budget from giving money to LREB. The reluctance is a political one. And I think it is because of practice from Treasury. Because we were very, very careful. The design it combines two things. If you look at how international organizations operate, a country can accede to an international organization. That's, for example, now we formed the African Union. And the organization becomes active. It becomes an entity. It becomes a legal person once a certain number, this is usually a threshold, have become signatories. So in LREB's case, we said, let the signatories be, because there are 14 counties. At the time, there were 14 counties. This was around 2017, 2018. We said, let them be 11 signatories. As soon as the governors of 11 counties accede or rather sign the agreement, it will become effective. It will become an legal entity. But then we say, but that is at the international level. There are also what are known as pacts. If you go to the United States, for example, the river Mississippi is managed, the so-called River Mississippi Basin Authority. Yeah? It is managed by what is called a pact. This is an agreement that is anchored in law in all the states that are members of this pact. So we said, let us also adopt that model. So we adopted those two models. That is why we say that there must be a statute, a law in each county approved by the county assembly, because when it is approved by the county assembly, it means that it has been approved by the people. So if the people have approved that this is how we want to spend our money, what authority does the controller of budget have to be telling the people that you cannot spend your money this way? And what is the law in the constitution or all the public finance management acts, legislation, where is it? Because we looked at all of them. That stops expenditure going to the Lake Basin Regional Authority. So for me, when I look at the law, I think the reluctant is not a legal one. It is a political one. Look at it this way. And we are doing this, I advised the Jumia as well. They adopted the same approach. And so they said, let's come up with a policy and take it to, I think the policy, I don't know if it went to Senate, I don't know if they ever passed it. But they said, because of this reluctance from the central government to empower, because this will empower the county government, the counties, in a very, very significant way. Because it means they can raise resources. It means they will no longer be able to, they will no longer be depending on central government. So look at it from our historical perspective and the devolution, the fight for the devolution that we've had for a very long time. Why would the central government, if they have been resisting empowering counties, why would they now allow this mechanism to just work seamlessly? And I'm not surprised. We are in 2025. This was around 2018. If we were saying that the law is having a law at the central level it's a problem, why haven't they passed it?
Other regions may also want to form blocks. So that this law would then be one, it would be generic in such a way that whatever any region wants to do, they still will operate through this. Okay.
This was a project of Sunni, what was it called? Ahadi. It was Ahadi Sunni. And usually after you've done a report as a consultant, they ask you, what is the way forward? I told them that you need a uniform legal framework for all the economic blocks, because there are about 5 of them. Yeah? So the recommendation was that if you're having, because that it's easier to operate across the entire country. And so for me, the national law was proceeding on that basis, so that we have uniformity at the national level. It was not because there are obstacles that prevent the national government from, or the national treasury from allowing these counties to give money to this economic bloc. You're in parliament, please champion it. Yeah, I don't know.
Prof,
all right, so
just a comment.
Yes.
That isn't it ironical that we are here looking for donors and investors, And here we are pointing that our mamas are already investors and their business remain unregulated and informal. But that shows you the mindset that we have, that we are talking about looking for investors. If today I came, Nyikal, and told you I have found one Swedish who want to invest in Seme, you'll be all over, you'll walk all over all the offices for this one investor. The PS and everyone will be told you cannot stop an investor. Yet, we have our own population, huge population, that is doing business, that are investors, but their business remain informal. And that is the irony of our thinking. Finally, the national commissions, independent offices, operate like there is only national government. I was given a role to coordinate national commission in the DP's office. And you realize, you wonder, why have you gone to counties? What is your policy about devolution? They all want to operate as if there is only the national government. And so the centrality, and that is the bad history that devolution came to actually do away with, including even the treasury. The question that why is treasury operating like the national government treasury and not the treasury of the people of Kenya who have embraced devolution, for example?
Yes. Exactly.
The basis on which the division of revenue will be done.
It's very patronizing. I mean, why would, if the counties have decided they're going to get together in economic blocks, why would that be a concern of the national government? Why should the national government be telling them, oh, you can't put money into this entity?
Anyway, we know.
Yeah, there's someone behind.
I just want to tell you a story. When the issue of Magendo came, and the late Jomo Kenyatta was told that there is Chep Kube and people are doing Magendo, that they are taking coffee from Ugandans and bring it here and exporting. So he asked, are they robbing them? No, they are paying Ugandans. And then they are sending out. So what is wrong?
Thank you indeed, everyone that is around, because my name is Tom Ojwang. Now, I just wanted to comment on the dilemma that I am seeing around here, because there are models across the world. So, for example, when laws are made up in other jurisdictions, I'm not very familiar with the Kenyan legal framework, but in the United Kingdom, for example, if, for example, a commissioner wanted to commission a service that is worth £10 million, the same law will apply, but the requirements will be different. And so it's about the implementation and how we manage this. And I think that perhaps it might be that because people are compartmentalized. So, for example, we have a very important session here, but virtually everyone here is from the legal background. Where are the investors? Where are the implementers? Where are the policy makers? So this is the gap. And I guess that perhaps out of this conference, maybe one of the things that could come out as a recommendation is, a lobby group, so that if, and I'm hoping there will be subsequent conferences, that those issues that are emerging out of here can now begin to be addressed through lobby groups, which then enables and encourages and brings about those other players. Because if the law alone is, having a meeting here and in this conference, and the investors aren't here, and the implementers aren't here, and the district commissioners, the governors, the people that do use the law are not here, then of course it is the gap. And I guess that might be what we think about. And I'm talking from experience from abroad, because I am a businessman over there, and I have seen how these big and small traders are catered for in the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ojwang. I think we can close on that note. And before we close, please join me in thanking our panelists for the very good discussions. And we are done. Thank you.